So there's nothing in the Cain and Abel story that isn't real. It's real, and Cain complains to God, as people will when their dreams are dashed. And that goes for people who don't believe in God too. It doesn't really matter, you know. It's harder, I suppose, if you're atheistic to figure out who to blame. But that doesn't mean that the sentiment, well, it doesn't mean that the sentiment is any different, right? The same drama is being enacted. You shake your fist at the structure of being rather than at God himself, but it doesn't make any difference except in the details. So God responds to Cain and tells him that he's got no right to judge being before he gets his sacrificial house in order. And even worse, he says that Cain is the architect of his own downfall, and the invited catastrophe in his own house, into his own house willingly, and entered into a creative union with it, and therefore brought about his own demise. And it's that additional self-knowledge, and you can imagine too, you know, imagine that you're facing your life, you're facing the failures of your life, and let's say that you've had a failed life, and you're bitter about that, and then you meditate upon it, and you think, well, why has this come about? And then you think, well, perhaps I did something wrong. So let's say you're conceptualizing your own failure, you know, and you meditated on it, and you come to the conclusion that God forced Cain to, hey, not only have things not been going very well for you, but it's actually your fault. And not only that, you brought it on yourself. And not only that, you knew it all the time. Well, then you might think you'll wake up and fly right? You'll get your wings in order and fly right, but there's no reason to assume that at all, and that's not what happens to Cain. That just makes him more bitter, right? And you can understand that if you think about it just for a second. It's like bad enough when something horrible happens to you, but then to have to swallow the additional pill, right? To have to take in the information that you could have done something different. It was avoidable, and you knew it at the time, and you decided to do it anyways. And I think people are in that situation a lot more often than anyone is willing to admit. You know, you have that little voice in the back of your head that says, don't do it. And you override it. And you know it's arrogance that makes you override it. It's always arrogance, you know. It always warns you. It's always arrogance. Yeah, I can get away with it. It's like, no, you can't. I don't think you ever get away with anything. So, and maybe your experience has taught you different, but my suspicions are it hasn't. And if you think it has, well, the other shoe hasn't yet dropped. So Cain doesn't take the opportunity to let God's wisdom reorient his character. And that could have been the outcome. He could have got down on his knees, so to speak, and said, oh my God, I've been wrong all along. I've been living improperly. I've been making the wrong sacrifices. Abel deserves everything he has. I got exactly what was coming to me. You know, could I possibly now straighten myself out and live in repentance and improve my position? But that's not what he did at all. He said, all right, fair enough. I get it. It's like, I'm going to go after the thing I most admire, and I'm going to destroy it. And I'm going to do that despite its cost to me. And I'm going to do that just to spite the creator of being. Well, that's exactly what Harris did at Columbine. It's exactly what he says, in fact, in his uncanny writings. Well, so Cain kills Abel. And then Cain gives rise to his descendants, one of whom is the person who's the first artificer in weapons of war. And then comes the flood, right? Which seems perfectly miraculously reasonable to me, because what those stories do, it's so amazing that the story of Cain and Abel segues into the story of the flood, because it is the case that the catastrophes that beset society can best be conceptualized as the spread of individual pathology into the social world, and the what would you call the magnification of that pathology to the point where everything comes apart. And I truly believe that if you familiarize yourself with the last 100 years of history, that that's the conclusion that you would derive. And the people who are most wise that I've read, who've commented on that, say the same thing over and over, which is the key to the prevention of the horrors of Auschwitz and the Gulag in the future is the reconstruction of the individual soul at the level of each individual. And that's a terrible message, because it puts the burden on you. But it's an amazing message because it also means that you could be the source of the process that stops that catastrophe and malevolence from ever emerging again. And you know, it's hard for me to imagine that you have anything that could possibly be better to do with the time that you have left.